If you've ever opened GA4 and thought, this data can't be right, you're not alone. A lot of people think GA4 is broken, but most of the time, the real issue is the implementation. In this video, I'm going to walk through the 4 most common areas that cause GA4 data to become unreliable. I'll also show you the key things you should check in each one. By the end of this video, you'll have a simple framework you can use to confidently diagnose whether your GA4 is set up to a fundamental standard, not an advanced but fundamental. This is especially useful if you're working with clients, agencies, or internal teams and want to verify that everything has been implemented correctly. In most cases, GA4 issues fall into 4 main areas: core GA4 configuration settings, tracking implementation issues, consent mode and privacy integration with your GA4 issues, and campaign tracking problems like UTMs. If any of these areas are misconfigured, your analytics data can quickly become unreliable. We will discuss these 4 areas and then we will jump into a GA4 configuration checklist spreadsheet we have created at the end. First are the core GA4 settings. These are often overlooked, but they can have a big impact on how your data is interpreted. One example is session timeout settings. Depending on the type of website you have, the default timeout might not be ideal. This default is set at 30 minutes, but in reality, you should set this at least 2 or more hours. To the maximum, you've got to 7 hours and 58 minutes. If sessions expire too quickly, users' journeys can become fragmented and cause spikes in landing page not sets, as well as unassigned traffic attribution issues. Another important setting is referral exclusions. Without proper exclusions, you might even see your own domain there, or even payment providers such as PayPal appearing as referral traffic. This can break attribution and make it look like conversions came from the wrong source. Cross-domain tracking is another common issue. If users move between multiple domains during their journey and cross-domain tracking isn't configured properly, GA4 may treat those visits as new sessions. This can split user journeys and distort your reports. Another thing to review is enhanced measurement. This is where GA4 essentially automatically creates events like scroll tracking, outbound link clicks, file download, video interactions, etc. While they can be useful, they often create duplicate or noisy data as well as cause attribution issues. We recommend any of these automated events you want to be tracked should be done via Google Tag Manager, so you can assure it doesn't cause data problems and you take control of your event tracking. Finally, data retention settings are worth reviewing as well. By default, GA4 limits how long detailed event level data is stored at 2 months. Extending this to the maximum retention period, which is of 14 months, allows you to analyze historical data over a longer time frame in tools like custom expiration reports within GA4. We will cover core settings in GA4 in our checklist at the end of this video. The second area where problems often occur is the tracking implementation itself. One common issue is improper configuration of tag sequencing. The Google Analytics 4 configuration tag should load before any event tag fires. If events fire before the configuration tag is loaded, this may not be processed correctly and cause attribution issues. Another issue is duplicate events. This can happen when events are triggered in multiple places. For example, an event might fire from Google Tag Manager and also at the same time from hard-coded GA4 scripts on the site. Duplicate events can inflate metrics like conversions or purchase or even page views. Another problem is incorrect event triggering conditions. Sometimes event triggers are too broad or not configured properly. This can cause events to fire when they shouldn't or fail to fire when they should. For example, firing a lead gen form submission event on a regular form submission trigger in Google Tag Manager could be counting users or even bots spamming the submit button but not actually completing the form properly, so the form submission never gets processed, but GA4 has countered this and causing this overinflation within GA4. Or the opposite could occur, where you are tracking form submissions for a specific type of form, but that form is in multiple places on the site. One of the forms your firing trigger works, but for another of the same type of form, for example on another page or footer, it doesn't work. So you end up missing event counts in GA4 for this, for example, form submission event. We will also cover this in our checklist towards the end of the video. The third area is consent mode and privacy configuration. Consent mode is essential for privacy compliance, but incorrect deployment can create major data gaps. There are also two types of consent mode for Google tracking. And in a nutshell, there is basic consent mode, whereby you only let tags fire and collect data once users give acceptance to said cookie type via your cookie banner. And there is advanced consent mode, where you let tags fire regardless of consent. But for users who deny consent, no cookie is deployed on the site, as there is a signal sent with the hit to say users have denied consent to that Google tool. And so Google processes this data via its cookieless server in a more privacy friendly way to be processed for modeling later on. Now let's get back to problems with this. A common issue happens on the very first page user visits when they have a cookie banner presented, particularly if you're trying to implement advanced consent mode from our point of view of what we've seen. If the consent state is not correctly established before tracking tags execute, that first interaction may not be tracked correctly. This can lead to missing sessions, incomplete attribution, high levels of unassigned traffic as an example, increased not set values and other means like landing pages, and ultimately unreliable reporting. Proper consent mode deployment ensures that tracking behavior adjusts based on the user's consent status whilst preserving as much measurement accuracy as possible. First of all, we recommend hard coding your consent management platform rather than deploying it through tools like Google Tag Manager. This is because Google Tag Manager can sometimes be blocked by tracking prevention technologies, browser restrictions, or ad blockers. If your cookie banner is deployed via Google Tag Manager and your Google Tag Manager is blocked, your cookie banner may never load for users, which is not a great first impression. Yes, you might be compliant because no tags are loaded, but users expect these cookie banners, so we want to make sure it's loaded for them. Second, script ordering is incredibly important. Ideally, your default consent mode call should load first, followed by your consent management platform script, which loads the cookie banner, and then Google Tag Manager. This helps ensure consent signals are established before tags begin executing, so that tags receive the correct consent state when they fire. If you simply want to implement basic consent mode, one of the easiest approaches is to conditionally load Google Tag Manager only once the user has granted consent for the relevant cookie category that you choose to load Google Tag Manager on. Most consent management platforms provide a way to do this. For example, Cookiebot provides a data-cookie consent attribute, which can be added to your Google Tag Manager scripts and configured only to load when consent has been granted for that specific category, for example, statistics or functional based cookies. That way, Google Tag Manager only loads once consent has been processed and the required consent has been granted. You should then still configure additional consent checks within your Google Tag Manager on all your tags to be fully compliant. For example, GA4 tag would typically require analytics storage. Now, this approach assumes consent signals are available before Google Tag Manager loads. However, even with correct script ordering, this doesn't always happen consistently because Google Tag Manager loads asynchronously, and depending on the consent management platform being used, the CMP script itself may also load asynchronously or be deferred, all these similar terminologies. This means Google Tag Manager can sometimes begin executing before the consent state has been fully established. If that's the case, stay tuned because this brings us to the advanced consent mode and some GTM wizardry you may need to do. If you plan to implement advanced consent mode, things become significantly more complex, and this is where I see the majority of attribution measurement issues occur. For this, we highly recommend only loading Google Tag Manager after the user has made a consent choice. I do not load it before the users interact with the cookie banner. Regardless of whether they accept or reject it, you can still load it afterwards. You can then manage consent signals within Google Tag Manager using the consent initialization trigger and consent updates from your consent management platform. This can become quite technical as it often requires custom JavaScript, custom data layer events, and bespoke implementation logic. If your developer is unable to implement this, or you don't have access to a developer, another option is to delay your GA4 configuration tag until a consent update event has been pushed into the data layer by your consent management platform. Most modern consent management platforms provide these events automatically. In addition, any non-interactive page level events such as page views, scroll tracking, view item, begin checkout, purchases or other e-com style events that load on the page for an e-commerce business should be carefully reviewed. In some cases, you may need to use trigger groups or additional trigger logic so that these events only fire once both the consent update event has occurred and the GA4 configuration tag has successfully loaded. This helps prevent events firing before consent has been established or before the configuration tag is ready, as if this happens, well, unfortunately, attribution breaks and certain dimensions get the not set problems, such as landing pages, unassigned traffic issues, etc. To be honest, I wouldn't recommend implementing advanced consent mode unless you fully understand how it works or have an experienced analytics engineer helping you. Also, we won't be covering this in our checklist at the end of the video, as it's very technical to do it 100%. We may do a separate video in the future though covering this. Therefore, we recommend for most businesses just going for the basic consent mode setup. The fourth area is campaign tracking. Even if your GA4 tracking implementation is technically perfect, attribution will still look messy if campaign tagging isn't structured properly. When UTMs are missing or inconsistent, traffic often ends up classified as direct, referral, or not set, or through unassigned traffic when it should be assigned to a proper channel. This makes it much harder to understand where users are actually coming from. If you want a deeper explanation of how to structure UTMs properly, I've covered that in another video which I've linked below. So at this point, you might be wondering, how do you actually check that everything is implemented correctly? Whether we implement or order a GA4 setup, we start with a fundamental checklist. These are the core things that should always be verified before moving the more advanced analytics work. In a moment, I'll show you the checklist we use and walk through it in a sample GA4, and we'll cover some GTM work for more the event tracking side. Just keep in mind that there are many more advanced things you can do beyond this. But if these fundamentals are implemented correctly, your GA4 data will already be far more reliable than it was before. Let's jump in. Okay, so welcome back. We're going to be talking about configuration checklist, and we're going to go through where to find this in practice within Google Analytics settings. And we're also going to go in a tag manager example through our No Analytics site and just show you, generally what we need to look at, and also how to view the source code to check Google Tag Managers there, or just make sure hard-coded GA4 is not there as well, because that's some of the checks we need to do. So let's just jump in. So this checklist is available to everyone through our website, and there'll be a link below in the description, so you can make your own copy of this and start scoring yourself if you passed or things need requiring attention. So it's a very simple checklist format, basically just seeing if you pass requires attention. In some cases, a couple of checks might also not be applicable, and we'll point it out as we go along. But yeah, generally speaking, you just want to go through each one, and there's two core tabs here. You got core GA4 settings, lots of stuff, status that you can sort of adjust. It's going to be a check, kind of a reason why. Also trying to add some screenshots to help you understand where to find that, or a bit more information just to generally help. Some of this is technical, or some of this just might not be so easy to find. So yeah, we tried doing multiple layers or just examples, and you might have to zoom in a little bit in the sheet, but generally there. And then we've got the core GA4 settings, and then we got the tracking checklist. Just a reminder that this is just essential configuration checklist. It's not covering every single setting, that we're missing out product links and things like that. These are things that are a little bit more advanced. So I just want to keep it pretty simple for the majority of users here. We're starting off simple. Eventually we're going to do more advanced checklists, and we'll do videos covering that. But I just want to start off with simple, and if it gets lots of downloads and stuff like that and people really find it useful, then I'll do a more advanced checklist to really get your GA4 to a really advanced state. But by doing this already, you're going to be better than 90% of setups I've seen out there. So yeah, by doing this, you're going to be ahead of the game than most people. A lot of people still haven't implemented GA4 100%, or even just the basics like we're covering here. So yeah, I just want to cover that just so you can get something out your GA4, and your data, more importantly, looks just a little bit better. And that's the key thing. So we just want to make your data look a little bit better and healthier, and make sure you got key conversion tracking, for example, and nothing too fancy. Let's just jump in. So I'm just going to zoom in just so we sort of see a little bit better what's kind of going on. So yeah, we start off with the GA4 settings checklist. and we're going to go through each one. I'm not going to go through the why so much. You can kind of read that in your own time, but we'll go through. So basically you want to make sure you've got data stream and web application set up, and then we've got like a brief kind of screenshot here. So if we jump into analytics, first of all, where do you find any of this anyway to begin with? You need to come to the left hand side, so you make sure you're in your account and property, click admin, and then you're in the sort of settings area of the admin section. And just for purposes, I created a test, so none of these settings are set up correctly. We're going to go through it together, create this brand new, just so we could, it's not my live site. Also don't want to share any of my information, so you can start randomly sending me data from random bits and bobs. So we're going to just use my test property so we can walk together through this. Key thing is we just want to really go to data collection, modification, and data stream, and just make sure we've configured this. Obviously I've just configured it data live, so it won't be tracking data, but just make sure that doesn't show that message anymore, and it's configured and etc. The key thing is when you click into this, you're going to get a measurement ID, and that's going to be really important to add in your Google Tag Manager. And we'll show that a bit later on. So yeah, that's the key area you need to check. Just make sure it's saying it's received data in the last 48 hours, and make sure you're ready to copy this. If for example, you're setting up something from scratch, a GA4 property, you need to make sure you copy that, and I'll show you later. And we say to use Google Tag Manager as a tool rather than hard coding, just so much better, many different ways. Anyway, going back to the checklist. So yeah, once we've set up and start collecting, we can give a status, and then we can go to the next check, which is check number 2. Do not let GA4 track events for you. Really not good. I'm going to say this, so many people leave it on, and I've had these, when first GA4 was about, working in my previous agency, we used to just be like, oh, just have it on, what harm can it do? Just a few extra events being tracked. It's really bad for various reasons, and we found a lot of attribution issues, things just a bit of unassigned traffic, not set issues happening, or landing page not set issues happening. Without control, just don't do it. Just set it up in Google Tag Manager. Any event you want that's from this, just do it. And I'll show you just in a list now. What do I mean? So basically, this is enhanced measurement. Turn this off ASAP. You do not want this. It'll automatically do page views or leave that. That's fine. You're also going to be setting up in Google Tag Manager for your config, either for your config tag, or we'll recommend actually setting up as a separate event, and we'll show you what that means later. Just turn that off. Honestly, not worth it. It can just cause problems in your data. I'm not going to go into why that can happen. I guess classic example, why you might see landing page not sets, why this could be caused. The classic one more is a specific event is scroll tracking. So scroll tracking, you need to be a bit careful. And this is kind of combined with another setting, session timeout, which we'll cover in a minute. But if a user times out and then all of a sudden they come back in, scroll down, trigger the event for scroll tracking, it will fire that event, but the page view didn't happen and a new session started because obviously you passed your session timeout, and that causes things like landing page not sets. Just as a weird example, but we've seen other things, or even PI get linked into certain dimensions with it that come with, you get a link text dimension. And if you're not careful, and your outbound link clicks sometimes tracks mobile and telephone clicks, even though it's your own business number, if you're passing that into your GA4 through the link text dimension, which is just a standard dimension you've got access to, then that actually goes against Google's terms and policies. So yeah, little things like that, but just turn it off, right? Done. Tick box. Set that. Any events set up through Google Tag Manager, you might want video tracking or scroll tracking or form tracking. Form tracking anyway shouldn't just be collected into one. It should have its own unique names per type of form, because each form has its intent. Generally just not bundling everything in form starts and form submits just makes no sense. And that's another reason as well. So now I'm moving back on. So we've gone through that. So we turned off that. Now we want to start going into more detailed stuff. So list of unwanted referrals. So just, you want to put your own domain always, just in case sometimes self-referrals can happen. That can just break attribution. It's very rare that can happen, but or it's a very small proportion of traffic that can happen. But just in case, do that. Also, if you're e-com site, or doesn't have to be e-com, but you accept any form of payment on your site, and you use third-party providers like PayPal, etc., make sure these are all added in as well. So we'll just show a couple examples, but fundamentally, go back here, you're in your data stream, go scroll down, figure tag settings here, okie dokie. So now we're here. Just go into list of unwanted referrals. Okay, so once we're in this setting, we just need to scroll down into list of unwanted referrals. We may want to put our own domain here. So in this case, so here, once we jump in here, we need to show more, and then we need to click list of unwanted referrals. And then we've already added it to here because it's actually associated to other one, not our main one. Then we can put like others like paypal.com, for example, click save. If we're like an e-com or got some sort of buying thing, you shouldn't have as like a referral. Like, yeah, just make sure, otherwise it breaks attribution. A new session's created accidentally when it shouldn't, and it will give the credit to that conversion event later on when it should have been given to an actual marketing source that you've invested in to drive to this conversion point. So you can click, for example, no harm putting paypal.com, even though I don't have it. Then we go to the next setting. The next one is correct. So the other thing is, if you've got cross-domain tracking, if you've got a subdomain, that's fine. Like Google Analytics understands subdomain, so cross subdomain you don't need to do this unless you've got some cross origin policy weird thing between the subdomains maybe going on. 98% of cases you're fine, right? If you've got a subdomain, you've got www.yourwebsitedomain.com, and you've got register.yourdomain.com, that's a subdomain. So that, don't worry, going from one subdomain to another won't cause attribution to break. You don't need to activate cross-domain tracking. It's only when you've got two actual different domains, domain A and domain B, completely different things, but maybe they have a lot of crossover. Maybe you start on one domain but complete on a different domain for whatever reason, you've got this partnership going on. Then you really need to do that, and just make sure you add that domain that's different. Obviously for this, we built it from analytics, but say we've got partner B site where we know there's a link and we want to integrate both into one property, then you need to just make sure you've added into configure domains that other domain. So you just come here, always add your own one. So that's just a good best practice. We don't need that. And then you can just do, exactly matches the domain B, domainb.com, right? So you can put that, click save, and then that should work. However, if you've got like if your website's got a strong cross origin policy, sometimes it won't work, and the only way to test it is going from one domain to the other. And if you see a really weird long query parameter with it's usually an underscored GA, it's usually the cookie identifier, then that means it's worked. But if you don't see that, it means it probably doesn't work, and unfortunately you need to like work with your developers to ensure cross-stitching between the two. So you'll need to tell them pick up the cookie from Google Analytics from domain A to domain B when a user does that. It requires a little bit of dev work, a bit more complex, but for most people this will work if you've got cross domain. But we have seen that when you've got stricter cross-origin policies, it's a very technical thing, not going to go in detail, but usually if you test from domain A to domain B, you should just see that at the end of the query parameter in domain B, and that means it's working. You only need this again if there makes sense to have these two domains connected. So just think carefully generally how you would set up your account, and if you want that second domain as part of it, you just have to think that's quite important as well. All right, so now we can go back, and then we can go to next one. This is a really important one, probably the most important one here. So we can just go, usually the default session timeout setting is 30 minutes, which is way too short, like way too short. Actually we'll cover both engaged session time as well because it's within the same setting. Again, that's default 10 seconds. That's what, like, because there's 3 conditions to what is an engaged session and therefore what affects the metric engagement rate. I'm going to do and what that means, but one of the conditions is what the engagement time is set up. And that, if you've left that 10 seconds, a lot of users are just stay 10 seconds before leaving, and they don't mean they're actually engaged. We really recommend a minimum 20, but I'd say even 30 arguably. I mean, you can even go up to 60, probably a bit too high, but I think 20 to 30, I'd say most 30, but occasionally 20 seconds I'd say is absolutely fine. Test different ones, maybe start with 20 and then go to 30, etc. on the engaged session setting. Session timeout, 30 minutes is way too short for like 99% of websites. And this is what can actually cause really bad tracking issues, in particular in like landing page not sets, not really attribution issues in session source mediums and all your marketing UTM sort of dimensions with different attribution types. This really affects like landing page. Like if you've got a high landing page not set, this could be one of the reasons. All right, so just changing this and increasing this, you're going to thank me later. Now some people just do the maximum of 7 hours and 58 minutes, I believe it is. This is the maximum. I would start off with 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours, and then increase it a bit more until you find the sweet spot. So just start off, but 30 minutes usually is way short. The only reason you'd have 30 minutes if generally your website had session timeout functionality, whereas you may have seen this if you go off for 40 minutes or so, an hour, 30 minutes, depending on what it's timed to, you might get a pop-up. Are you still here? Click here in the next 5 seconds, otherwise we're kicking you out. Then if you've got that, then make sure the session timeout settings match to that time functionality you put on that function, the kicking out session timeout within your website. If you don't have that, which most 98% of websites just don't have that, which is fair enough, probably from a user experience perspective, you just don't want to have that, then I just start minimum 2 to 3 hours and slowly increase it, and and then you can go up to 7 hours 58 minutes in the maximum if you want, but just to show you where that is, again, it's still within this area. But if you go to just session timeout, both of these are here. So let's just take an example. We'll do 2 hours here and put 30 seconds, all right? And then so that covers those two checks. They're quite, we've done them specifically in that order because that makes sense. Allow user provided data capabilities. Now, do not allow Google to automatically collect this. And what does this actually mean? Basically, this is like the settings. That's where you're sending to Google or letting Google collect, depending on what option you select, on your contact forms or if you've got like checkout pages or whatever, where it's got user personal identifiable information like their first name, last name, email, phone, whatever's on these forms. You're just letting Google collect that. Now, in theory, they should be hashing it and doing stuff, but it's a quality issue. Like, what are they even doing? Are they doing it correctly? Can they scrape it automatically and not cause a fuss in your data? Not entirely sure. We've seen problems just having this enabled, simply turning it off and doing it ourselves through Tag Manager, sending it through the conversion, which is called enhanced conversions. Doing it properly manually, just data looks so much better afterwards. So we just recommend, but generally I would not, it's already sensitive data, yet alone if you want to argue doing it or not doing it, even if it gets hashed, and you can verify that by doing it manually, you can verify doing it, you can check the hit and you can see it gets hashed and stuff, like email addresses and stuff of your customers. But yet alone just doing it manually, there's questions, but like just letting Google just scrape whatever and do whatever it wants, to me that just screams don't, just from a legal and just perspective, don't do it. Like, turn it off, do not allow them to do it, or leave it default. So here, where we find that is allow user provided data capabilities. We just select over here. You can allow if you want to do things like enhanced conversions. That's absolutely fine. Leave that, but just tick off this and do not specify CSS selectors, JavaScript. Set it up in Tag Manager if you're going to do it. We're not going to show you necessarily for the purpose of this video. Just don't let, that's going to be a separate video, has the enhanced conversion tracking properly and robustly into the best practice standard, both for GA4 and Google Ads. But yeah, just make sure this is ticked off. And I wouldn't even tick this. You can leave this on if you eventually want to do it through Tag Manager. That's absolutely fine. Leave that. Perfect. And you'll thank me later because it can sometimes cause attribution issues just leaving that in there. So yeah, definitely turn it off. Now, we're not going to go through how to check consent mode and really deep thing. Consent mode is one of the most complicated tracking things that gets integrated in your tracking, in this case in a Google style way, but you can integrate it to work with your other platforms as well in terms of handling consent and stuff like that within Google tools like Google Tag Manager. But we're sticking with GA4. Obviously, if you've got a consent manager platform, it should be sending some signals. You might not set it 100%. This setting it might give you some tick boxes. Basically, in this case, because we haven't obviously set up any data, you just come back to this bit, down to consent settings, and you just want to see tick boxes here everywhere. Unless you're in a specific country, you don't need this, but Europe, you definitely need it. There's no excuses. US don't necessarily consent mode, but like a lot of states do require you to like respect consent in its own way. It's got slightly different rules than GDPR, which is Europe. But yeah, you could be in some random country that's outside, I don't know, Russia or China, don't need to respect it, don't really know their legislations over there, so do not quote me on that. And maybe you don't need it. Okay, fair enough. But for the most people watching this, you're going to need it to some degree. So just come here. I'm not saying it means you're compliant if you've got ticks. Trust me, it does not mean that. You need to do much deep technical checks, which are very, very advanced to get it properly. But just for sanity, like there. And fundamentally, also just make sure you've also came here and don't touch around with the default. Don't let Google mark this as just consented. That's not really okay in many regards. So yeah, again, just make sure that's left as no as a default. Don't click that just because you're desperate to have cleaner data over compliance. Brilliant. That's not actually in the check, that last one, because that doesn't actually hurt your data. It might help, but it's just wrong to do it more so. So that's why I don't mention it in here. The other thing we generally just recommend, and it's a quick thing to do, is just enable Google Signals. Obviously, if you're happy for Google to provide you demographic and interest reporting, it uses your data as well to help understand that as well. So providing you're actually happy to do that, this is actually in data collection, and then you just need to click turn on. Read that, accept it if you're on a test property. We're not even collecting data. That's absolutely fine. You can actually control regions as well. So if you need to do that, you can. Compliance reasons, maybe you need to do that. Based on your business, maybe a healthcare system or whatever, you have certain, in your global company, certain countries you need to be stricter than others, whatever, then you can kind of have that control. Again, user provided data connection. So we saw in the previous one, you have to enable it like there for it to allow. Also, if you want to do, it's not mentioned in checklist because it's a bit more advanced, but yeah, I just recommend turning this on if you're going to do enhanced conversions. You can read that here and play around. Again, it's a topic for a different video. Another thing I just recommend, doesn't actually do anything to your data, but just come to the bottom here and click I acknowledge, or maybe don't, and then maybe you might be less in trouble with Google if they catch you or something. But just generally, if you're really OCD like me, turn these things on if you need to. Not necessarily mentioned there here. The next thing is update your data retention settings. So by default, this is set at 2 months, which is too little. So you want to push it straight away to 14 months. There's no negative of doing that, like other than positives of having more data, historical data. Now, it's not all reports get affected. It's specifically custom exploration reports, which are a little bit more advanced. So maybe not everyone here knows how to do them, but it's these reports here. So you've got standard reports here in exploration. So if you're creating exploration reports, these get affected. So it's definitely worth just coming here, data retention. Your user data is fine. That always is 14 month, leave it 14 month, and just quickly change that there and click save. And then you're done. And you'll thank me later when you're trying to create your customer exploration reports and you're trying to look for more than 2 months. And after you've just done that, you can. Obviously, it's not retroactive. So, it's from the day you've changed it. So this is why as soon as you set up a new property, do it ASAP. For those of legacy, unfortunately, you're changing it now. You go straight away to explore. You're not going to have that historic. It's not retroactive. Okay. So then we need to make sure any crucial events we set up, and we're going to go through some tag manager stuff in a minute, but just make sure you've set these up correctly. All right. Set these up as key events so that they can be shown in your sort of reports. Key thing here is you've got to come down to data display and events. You're going to see a bunch of events. Obviously, I've got no tracking, but say if I had, technically I do have an event called contact form submits, which I've already set it on my main property, but on my test, it's not there as a key event because obviously I haven't sent any data yet. It should show up if you've been having events tracked for a while. Even if you haven't marked them yet, it will show a list of events that you can just click the star button. Just for simplicity, we can just do that. And it says, create with code, and then click create, mark as key event. And then I don't need to put a value on it. You can do once per event. Sometimes you might even want to do once per session, can sometimes be helpful, particularly if you're not sure how to do tracking properly in Google Tag Manager to make sure things happen like on a successful form submission or whatever. There's ways to mitigate double counting as much as possible by maybe doing once per session. But for now, I know what I'm doing, so I'm pretty confident in that. So that's already there. They've got already some default ones. You can untick these, leave them. They're not actually registering my thing. You just got qualified lead purchase and close convert lead just automatically there. It's just if you use these event names in your setup, so if you set up purchase tracking, it'll just automatically mark it as a key event. You can't turn that off. And what that means is in your reports, in particular, things around traffic acquisition reports and stuff like that, you're going to see in your key events that you can now select contact form, and it's going to give you the number of events. If you also change this to contact form, you can see the conversion rate, so session to key event rate, and basically get access to that. So it's definitely worth doing. Know your key events. Make sure you've got good event naming convention, which will, once we go into the tag manager setup, don't just call something called a form _submit. Doesn't really make sense because you could have a newsletter form. I wouldn't argue a newsletter form's a key event. It's an engagement event. It's useful to know, but I wouldn't be bidding my money onto that. So, if there's a contact form to lead gen, great. That should definitely be. That's why I would name it contact _form submit. So then I can come in here and, mark it as a key event. It's really, the event naming is really clear what it is. It's a contact form and we're submitting it. Great. So these are really key. That's why actually knowing how to name your events, I know it sounds weird, is just something you need to be bearing in mind. But also just GA4 event naming tip, everything should be lowercase and in between spacing just put underscores, right? And so everything's combined. That's just a GA4 best practice thing. Some other platforms do things differently. They like their event names done in a different way. GA4, that's the best practice. So remove any events created in the GA4 creation tool. So this could be a legacy thing that people try to do over time. Do not use this tool. Use Google Tag Manager always. It's just terrible. It can cause problems in your data, break attribution, a bunch of different things. So we just generally don't recommend it. And also just the accuracy is very questionable, how much it's counting, is it double counting, it's not done for a proper mean and proper tool. But if you come back to settings and go to events, all you need to do is go to customize events. Just have a look here, you're going to see a list. You should not need to do any customization here. You do not need to do any modifications. So modifications could be the event's fine, you're not creating an event, but you want to modify a parameter or add a parameter based on certain criteria. Everything should be achievable through Google Tag Manager. No need, don't have it here, it gets messy. So just delete and set it up in Google. Ask your technical person or yourself if after this video you've learned something, or watching some of other videos in the future where we'll actually show you some technical tag manager stuff. Do that and just set it up. Tag manager all the way. Take control of your data. Tag manager. That's what it means. Okay. Or you can hard code it. Hard coding can also work. Get your developers to do it if they know what they're doing. All right. That's another way. But do not set events up through this tool. Okie dokie. That is the checklist for settings, all right? It's really not too difficult. If you got like engagement events set up, so you really understand user behavior, if you've got all your e-commerce, like absolutely everything done to T, like is the data, like metadata being passed through in some of the custom events, so you set up, that's really for an advanced checklist. We just want key crucial things. I'm not too worried about for this video, like you're going to have a perfect GA4 setup. No, but you're going to have a better setup. So I just want to start off with this. It's a core checklist, right? It's an essential checklist. Let's go into top line GA4 tracking checklist. So this is more into Google Tag Manager territory, as well as just how to check things and things like that. So first of all, we always recommend Google Tag Manager, right? So just get Google Tag Manager, right? This is the tool here, if you're wondering. This is a tool. You can go here, create up your container, set it up. It even tells you after you've done that, it asks you a bunch of things. Do you acknowledge, do you agree, Go through that. Once you've finished, it'll give you the code. And then ask your web developer to install that on every single page, right? That's it. So there are two types of code you do get given. Like you're given a main script that you have to add in the head, the higher the better on the web page, but ordering can be important. So and I'll say that in a minute, don't always put it at the top, and I'll say certain reasons why it shouldn't be right at the top, but high up is what I'm going to say, and I'll give a bit more details in a minute. And you've got a body no script. It's more like a nice to have. Don't stress if you don't have the body script. It's not going to break your data. It's basically when people don't enable JavaScript on their website. But if they don't enable JavaScript, I mean, practically half the web page isn't really going to work or do anything. So the likelihood of that happening is very slim. So don't worry about the no script tag so much. Just make sure you've got the head script. No script is like secondary. Basically just coming back here, tells you some information, screenshots, just giving it a couple examples that you need to look out for. And you can also look at the tag coverage thing. So one thing is to do is actually just to check it manually. And I'll show you here, and it gives you how to check. It gives you all the information here so you can read it. What you got to do is come to your website URL that you're interested in, click view page source, click Control F, right? That's on Windows and Mac. Do GTM dash. Typically you're going to see the script here. There you go. Oh, I found it, and it's really high up in the head. Brilliant. Now, quick, just while we're on the video, not mentioned necessarily because it's a bit more advanced, but if you do have cookie consent, usually should hard code it. Don't deploy it in Google Tag Manager. I mentioned this in this video actually earlier on. The key thing is, if you particularly got consent, you need to put your default call. If you're going to hard code, which is recommended, put your default first, then your cookie consent, and then your Google Tag Manager, right? So just quick pointer there, little extra thing that I'm giving, not necessarily in the checklist, but but I'm only making sure, just make sure it's as really high up in the head as possible, but also below these two, always recommended. It might be below a couple of others, you might need to put it below, but generally it's got to be relatively high up, okay? Now you might also have it in the body, which is also fine. So that should be in the body, you see the body section, and you can see the no script there. That's not super essential, don't worry about it too much, but hey, check it while you're there. Just go through all your pages, as many, or at least key pages. Obviously you could have hundreds of pages, and just check it, right? If you've seen it over 100, 200 pages, your developers probably put it pretty much on every single page, right? So not to worry too much. Okay tool, it's not too bad, but it's called a Google Tag Coverage Report. So if you go to admin, you can click tag coverage here, and it would show you all the pages, tag, no recent data. Okay, these are just old data pages on my old website before I did my new site. It's no longer detected, tagged, and it shows you some different statuses. So just download this. It could be an easier way for you to check all your pages. It's not perfect. It doesn't always work. It sometimes says a page isn't tagged, and you go on and do the manual check that I've just told you, and it works. That's okay. It's just a rough indication. You can build, and I'll probably release this in the future. I do have like a Python script, for example, that checks everything in the head and body, checks for GTM, puts in a table for you. Is it tagged, not tagged? You can do that from Python. Get AI to help you write it if you need to. Learn how to run a Python code somewhere. I'm in a Jupyter notebook. If not, I'm probably going to end up releasing that script some point in the future for all of you to access as well. That's also probably an even better way than this. However, I actually do want to mention something. Sometimes it may not show up here, but some websites I've seen basically gets loaded after the DOM, and I won't go into detail what that means, but basically it's loaded through sometimes external applications, and then it gets loaded super quick, so they're done through servers. It's not like in a bad way, but it won't show up there because that might only show because if it's quite an advanced website that they're using a lot of servers to load stuff, and I'm not going to talk dev stuff. I'm not a developer by all means, but it might not show up in the view source code, but you might see it, for example, in the elements page. So if you do that, Control F, and then do GTM dash, you can start seeing some GTM stuff, right? And you can open up some bits and bobs. So this is consent call. If we go through here, there we go. So we can see our script here. So this will definitely show up. This is like the ultimate check, I guess, in a way. So just bear it in mind, if you can't see it here, it doesn't not necessarily mean it's not done to best practice. It's just loaded post DOM and through external means, basically. I'm not going into technical details because even I can't talk that level of developer terminology, but just note that down. So we've done that now. We need to, so we check GA4. The other thing is, okay, we're doing things through GA4, right? Then we don't need to load GA4 anymore. And a lot of websites do this. They install Google Tag Manager, but they forget they've already had like a plugin. Maybe they're a WordPress website and they've got a plugin already dealing with the GA4. So they're loading GA4 through Tag Manager and through the plugin, like a WordPress plugin or whatever. So it gets hard coded as well. So if you're doing just do everything through Tag Manager. Don't do mix and match. We're going to do this script, like this GA4 script with that, the rest not. No. If you didn't do Google Tag Manager, everything needs to be in Google Tag Manager, Google Analytics. So key thing here is you need to just double check, like your measurement ID, which is G- and a bunch of stuff, is not present. So I'm going to actually show you. I would typically go here. Obviously, I'm safe. So I'll show you a safe way. So I'm extremely safe, right? G- is just image stuff, but I can't see, like, I've got no GA4 hard coded. I'm in the good, right? I'm going to go through an example website where they've got it, right? And what's really confusing, you're going to see like sometimes a script like this. There's Google Tag Manager, but this is G tag and it's loading the measurement ID. This is not Google Tag Manager. This is GA4, right? The key thing really though is this configuration bit here. But if you see that, do not mistake that. That's not Google Tag Manager. That's GA4 hard coded, right? So this cannot happen. You know, if you're going to go with GTM, go with GTM. In this case, this website only has hard coded GA4, so it's not double counting things. So it's fine. No complaints there. But if you're going to do it properly, like we recommend for using a tool like Google Tag Manager to handle your tagging, various positives on that, and we just suggest it. Just make sure you're also not hard coding GA4 at the same time, because that can cause double page recounting, bunch of other problems. So definitely don't want that. Okay, that's a way to do that. Note from this is obviously taken in June, the video, but we need to bear it in mind from summer and the next couple of months. Google's introducing a new way to sort of like to integrate Google Tag Manager and something called Google Tag. There's not going to really be a need for like a configuration tag. For example, in your Google Tag Manager, you just need to load Google Tag Manager on your website, and configuration tag, maybe a page views, is automatically going to get loaded. This is something that's going to be it's only a recent thing that's getting tested and trialed. So I'm still doing it it's going to be the newly old-fashioned way. So just bear that in mind. This video might need just a tweak there, but generally speaking, it's kind of, we're in that mix of this happening at the moment. So just something to be wary of. Okay, GA4 config tag must fire before any event. All right, so this is a Google Tag Manager thing, or hopefully removing, you don't have any hard-coded GA4. Got everything in Google Tag Manager. That's not going to now. So now nothing can happen, right? So make sure all plugins and everything's not loading GA4 at all, right? And you've done everything properly. Now we can go in complexities. If you're WordPress, Shopify, everyone's got their unique how to do that. Not covering each individual. There's so many web builders, custom sites as well, and it's just a mess to go through each individual one, but I've showed you just ways of just checking it. Now we just need to make sure the config tag is guaranteed to fire before any other event, and this can even happen in Google Tag Manager. It could be that you've hard-coded GA4. You could have, like, I don't know, a GA4 purchases happening on the site, but you've set up the GA4 config tag with Google Tag Manager. Hard-coded GA4 purchase event on the thank you page loaded before the config tag, which is maybe loading your other things. What this causes is attribution issues. All your purchases are just going to go to not sets in an unassigned traffic pooling channel grouping. So definitely don't want that to happen. We've seen really silly things where people have done it even just within Google Tag Manager, yet alone hard-coded thing overriding that, etc. Example I gave before. So the key thing here is just make sure your Google Tag Manager is obviously as good as gold. And then if you've got sort of hard-coded problem, that's obviously a separate matter, right? So the way to make sure like your config tag ain't going to do any like load is you've got to put an initialization all page trigger. It really depends on the type of consent mode you want as well. Maybe you need a basic consent mode, so you've got to be a little bit careful. But generally speaking, if you've got advanced consent mode, definitely do it like this. Like just do this. You've got your Google tag, your measurement ID, that if you want to send other parameters. I'm not going through advanced setups, just very simple. But yeah, just add that. You can also add a sort of a tag priority as well. And if you put like 99 or 999, it can help a little bit as well, but generally you can do that, for example. That's fine, and that can just help it guarantee it to fire before any event. Because even if the data layer, like a purchase event, loads, say we got these data layer, I'm not going to go through what data layer is, but it's just an event that's readable in Tag Manager. Say you got a purchase one that loads before Google Tag Manager, and then you've got a tag that's firing on that data layer event. Now, because you've got initialization, Google knows to prioritize this first versus if you use a regular. The only thing is you need to bear in mind is with consent mode, and I spoke about this earlier in the video, and I'm not going to go into too much complexity because it's super advanced and super complex to do advanced consent mode, but also basic consent mode to some degree. If you're going to do like basic consent mode. Simply doing this on initialization trigger. And if you're not engineered your Google Tag Manager to load on consent, and if the update call just doesn't happen by a certain point, it could just cause problems. Now, this is why sometimes you might want to updo your initialization on a consent update style event. But for an advanced setup, advanced consent mode setup, I'll just leave this all page initialization. That's more than enough. And then you do a separate page view. And we'll talk about, generally it's better to separate page views and do that on consent update. And I'll go through consent stuff that needs its own thing. We'll talk maybe a little thing towards the end. Yeah, generally you just need to do that. So that's a check. Just make sure you've got initialization trigger ideally, unless you really adamant you need basic consent mode, then it's going to be a bit more complex. Generally speaking, that's what you want. Now, I always also recommend separating the GA4 page view event. We just find letting the config tag do it. Sometimes it doesn't load the page view event, or sometimes it can cause double counting. It's just better to take control, load it yourself. And in particular, if you've got setups like a single page application where you really definitely need to do this, like you need it to be separated, you just cannot, it's not even an option to have it as within the configuration tag to load. You might need to load it, because on a single page application, if you go from one screen to another, the page hasn't reloaded, so the config tag hasn't reloaded again, so it doesn't actually track that second screen, so to speak. So you need to then do a custom. You can go on history change. It's just, I'm not going to go through tag manager specifics. You could do that, but generally you want to ask your developer to load a custom data layer event on each screen, and then you use that. It gets into more complexities. There's some information here that will definitely help you. I'm not going to go through, I could spend a whole video on this. So generally, even if you're not on a single page application, generally turn this off. Like my recommendation, do this. Send page you get a little tick box that it verifies it as a variable. Instead of saying it's true, put it to false. Then create a separate event, and then you want to call it page_view, and that's it. I mean, if you're on a single page application, you technically need to be passing through the new page URL like that through event parameters, like through here. I'll show you quickly, but you've got page location. That won't come out as a tick box, but it is a correct property. And then you can put your new variable, whatever that is, and then page. So these are like legitimate stuff. You just need to put page location, page title, so it updates with that if you need to. Obviously in my case, I'm not a single page application so much, so I don't need to do this. What I've done, I've just fired on cookie consent update. This is a cookie box. I use cookiebot as my consent management platform. I've got this event. It works nicely. Every single page I'm charactered this event. It loads nicely. I use it, and it really recommended, because then it's when users have given their consent, so they've updated, and then if they've granted consent, then it's going to give the right value. And if I loaded it just on a regular page view trigger or initialization, like through the configuration tag, the update state might load a little bit too late, so it doesn't get like connected with the hit basically. So we just recommend it. Trust me, it's just, if you've got consent and you've got some sort of consent mode, separate the page view, fire it on a cookie consent update, you'll thank me later. Data's going to look a lot nicer. It's a little tip there. More advanced tip as well, because not many people do that, even in semi-advanced people that claim to be semi-advanced in this sort of stuff. So yeah, the other thing is GA4 event is present on all relevant pages. So obviously just make sure that this trigger, like I know cookiebot, I've got cookiebot installed on all my pages, so I know like this is going to work. So one thing obviously you can do is go through all your pages manually through GTM preview mode. So we click the preview button, we just come here and we just make sure, that data layer event, for example, is going to work on all those pages. So we're going to buy that page view, right? Now we can go to pre-tools, actually is a separate page, so I can check that. So we come here. Bit glitchy, that's what I mean. I wouldn't trust preview mode all the time. There are other ways. I'm going to show you the second way. That's a classic example where I don't trust it all the time, but it definitely would have worked. So there we go. We can see page views sent. So yeah, we can see that works completely fine. Another way to do this is if you go to inspect, you go network, and then you click collect ? It says this in the doc, by the way, as well. You can kind of just see like what hits are getting sent. So you can see here, page view events fired. So this is actually the ultimate way to check. There are like Chrome extensions, that you can use as well. This is like the really OG way of doing it. So don't always trust preview mode. It's really buggy at half the time. Like this is really like how you want to be checking stuff. And the same thing with, like, we'll show you how to check it with contact forms and everything. This is like click inspect, come here to network, filter for collect ? But bear in mind, if you've just done that, you might need to reload the page just because it hasn't remembered that, you need to start afresh with this all open for it to work. So you just go and do that, right? So it tells you bumps of information how to do that. Now, the config tag, again, should be present on all pages. Hopefully, we've done that. Guaranteed to fire all events. So now we need to make sure custom key events are implemented, right? So we showed you how to add that into the settings, but actually you've got to make sure you're tracking them, right? And now we're talking Google Tag Manager. So I've got a contact form. I've got something called contact form submit. I've set it up, right? Just check you've got this in your Google Tag Manager. We'll check in a minute how to test it actually works and how it works properly, because it's a key event. I want to cover it quite in detail. So that, maybe I'm passing parameters. I'm not going to go through event parameters, custom dimensions, more advanced topic, but we're passing through some cool info. I've also done like an example. I don't actually have a purchase. I've just added it in for this video purpose, but you could have that. And I'll show you triggers and accuracy with consent in a minute. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, you just want to have that. For me, I've just got contact forms, which is my most important thing for me, for my business, right? I've not added engagement events here. Like, I'm just keeping it simple. What's the essential checklist, right? So now firing accurately, we need to check that, right? So one thing is just checking you've got it. One thing is actually checking it's working and it's doing its job correctly. So for contact, like for lead gen forms, it should be firing only on successful submission. Try not to fire it on thank you pages. Yes, technically that means it's on success if you've got a redirect to a thank you page after a form submission occurs correctly, but bots and everyone can get there. Or if you reload the page, like the user reloads the page on the thank you page, it fires again, I can just go and access that page if I've somehow figure it out, because it's got a thank you -u. I've seen it in the past. Thank you pages have caused massive upset in data, right? Overcounting drastically, way more than what the back-end figures are showing and everything. So try not to do thank you pages, and try not to use a regular GTM submit trigger. So you've got a trigger in GTM. I'll just show you here. There's different ways to create them. I'm just showing you as an example, but you could do it on, and say you did a specific form, even on a specific form ID, you really try to go that granular. This doesn't guarantee it on successful form submission. This will just be if I just go and go to my contact form, this here, if I just go spam, I haven't filled it in. Oh, guess what? It fired. Oh, it's fired again. Yes, you could do things. Remember going back into the GA4 settings when you set up a key event, you could do it once per session to help mitigate that a little bit more. Just set it up properly in Tag Manager and you'll thank me later. So in this case, it's a custom form. I'm the developer. I've manually put in a data layer event called contact_form submit. That works, and I'm using that trigger to then fire my tag. I made sure as a developer, ask your developer to do this if it's a custom form, to just do that on only successful form submissions on this screen. Ideally, therefore, don't need a thank you page. Just a thank you message, right? It's sufficient. You don't need to have an extra page, right? Just have thank you messages that pops up, which mine does. I'll show you in a minute. But we just want to make sure that fires on success. We're not interested on just, see, I've clicked, it hasn't gone through, right? There's no event there. So now if I'm going to make sure my form's quite finicky with me with testing, so I'm just going to give this a go. But yeah, if you've got like HubSpot forms, or if you're working WordPress, you've got WP7, CF7 forms, Ninja forms, they've got custom HTML listeners you can just chuck into your Google Tag Manager that has, and there's loads of stuff out there, and eventually we'll probably cover this in our channel and through blogs and stuff. I just don't want to repeat what's already out there a lot, but you can just pinch, like there's listeners that they listen to on success, because they're just forms where those developers building those forms through the plugins, through WordPress or HubSpot or whatever, they know like they want you to track like successful form submission to your marketing platforms through front end means. They've got solutions for that, and so they've enabled those solutions so you can use good listeners that only do successful form submission tracking. All right, perfect, successful. We've sent it. We can see here. Now we're going to the next thing, how to actually check it. Track validating through debug view. So obviously not through debug mode. We can just come here, check it here, and also just a reminder, we've also got a network request, although we might need to reload the page. Just be careful if it goes onto a new page, if you don't click preserve log, it's not going to show. Yeah, we just need to make sure that we've got, contact. Yeah, so we've got the contact form submission here. Now this is just because it's not connected to preview mode, this one, because I've got my server side set up, but yeah, you can see it through the event name here. It's the same thing, got collect, it's just going to my server side subdomain, but you get the point. How to check it in different ways. Now, the final check is to do it through GA4 debug view. It's a bit buggy, even that, but it's a really good way. So the only way to do that, you should go here too. We can see stuff go through. So we see page views, we see the green ticks. We marked it as a key event. So when you get this green tick, green flag, a white flag with a green background, you can see there, and we can see loads of information, all good stuff. So we can see page view, great, because there's multiple page view, refresh the page a few times, so you can see stuff. So yeah, the only way to get access to that is if you're in GTM preview mode. There is an analytics debugger Chrome extension as well, still kind of live, but also kind of being redundant at the same time. But you can just enable that, and then you click enable and it reloads the page for you, and you can do your testing and it shows up. So you don't necessarily need GTM to to do it. You can also download that Chrome extension that Google built to get that as well. But anyway, that's a checklist. I hope you found that useful. We'll go through just quickly, if you are doing purchase stuff, and I mentioned this earlier in the video with consent, you may want to do a trigger group of purchase with your cookie consent update. Just a little tip there. For things like add to cart, which is like a more interactive event. So these are for more non-interactive, like begin checkout, view item list, these sort of stuff that if you're on an e-com site and you've got consent and consent mode, you might just want to do these trigger groups. It really will make sure these will load after like your page view, for example, which you're firing cookie consent update. And also add to cart's fine because it's interactive, although not all sites it's interactive. Website types like Magento it's not, for example, but Shopify typically is for most plugins or apps that you use to do your data layers, if you decide to do Google Tag Manager with your Shopify store. But yeah, just something to be wary of. Interactive events, you're fine, you can just use that. But non-interactive, where you're doing on a page load, which will load on the thank you page usually, then you need to do ideally trigger groups if you're doing consent mode, to really just make sure your data doesn't get messed up. You may even need to, like I said before, even fire this on cookie consent update and fire this maybe on trigger group or cookie consent update and regular page view, just so that loads a little bit after the config tag. Sequencing is really important. Anyway, they're just top tips for another conversation where we'll go a bit more advanced. Hope you found that useful. And like I said, the link will be below for you to download it as well. Most analytics problems aren't caused by analytics tools itself. They're caused by gaps in the implementation. If your GA4 feels unreliable or confusing, start by reviewing these fundamentals. In most cases, you'll quickly identify the issue, and once those foundations are fixed, GA4 becomes a much more powerful and trustworthy tool for understanding your marketing performance. If you want a copy of our GA4 Fundamentals Checklist, there's a link below to where you can get your own copy. If you also like this video, then click like, and if you have any questions, feel free to pop it down in the comment section below. If you want more videos like this, then subscribe to stay on top of our videos.